Welcome, everybody. I'm Michael Peter Edson. I'm an independent consultant working at the intersection of technology, culture, and democracy or civil rights. I have a 30-year career in technology and museums. My first museum job was cleaning plexiglass at the Smithsonian Institution 30 years ago. $10 a case. It was the best job I've ever had. I miss it. And it's harder than you might think. So today, welcome to the GLAMers, digitally mediated youth engagement in GLAMs, by which we mean galleries, libraries, archives, and museums during the pandemic. This is an EU-funded project. This project is designed to find and catalog concrete examples of youth engagement initiatives and share insights and lessons learned with GLAM professionals in Europe and around the world. Our society does a lot of talking about how important young people are. Our sector does a lot of talking about how important young people are, but in reality, far too many organizations in our sector, for them, working with young people is not that high a priority day to day. This is the scope of the GLAMers EU-funded project. It aims to understand how the GLAM and cultural sectors are serving young people digitally during the pandemic, and to try and understand what the sector could do to increase the number, success, and impact of these programs. I act as an informal advisor to the GLAMers project. Actually, Katerina, I'm a formal advisor to the GLAMers project. I'm also a co-chair of the Europeana Advisory Board. Our program today will last about 45 minutes. We'll begin with an overview from Katerina. Then we'll move to 3 short case studies selected from the 90 projects collected and analyzed by this initiative. Jenny Ryan, head of learning and culture at MOLI, the Museum of Literature Ireland in Dublin, will talk about MOLI's Bright Sparks Creative Bursts program. These are writing games presented through YouTube videos and downloadable materials. Then Tom Brink, head of publications and presentations at Anne Frank House, Amsterdam, will talk about the Anne Frank video diary and other activities at the museum. Finally, Peter Arts, head of audience participation and communication at SMAC, the Municipal Museum of Contemporary Art in Ghent, Belgium, will talk about the Imagine Air Museum in Citadel Park, featuring mobile enhanced discovery of artworks and social media sharing. Jenny, Tom, and Peter's projects are, as I said, among 90 projects collected by the GLAMers study, and they're also among 15 projects highlighted in handsome, clickable, easy-to-read one-pagers that are available at the end of the report. And I think Katerina now is going to put in chat a link to the directory where you can find that report. It's available in many languages, and there's also a one-page infographic for your viewing pleasure. As I said, today's webinar will last 45 minutes, including questions and answers at the end. Feel free to fire questions into chat, and we'll use the Q&A button as well at the bottom of your Zoom interface. If the speakers are able, we'll stay online until the end of the hour. If you like what you see here and want to share it with a friend, we'll have another webinar in November, as well as a 2 or 3 hour training workshop for GLAM professionals on October 13th. I'll be the designer and facilitator of that workshop along with Katerina. Please join us then and spread the word. And Katerina will share links and hashtag in the chat. We'll hold questions at the end, but feel free to share your thoughts and questions in the chat, and we'll get to them when the speakers have finished. Please, if you're attending, edit your person name in Zoom with however you want to be known or identified. If you have issues with conduct, please let me or the moderator know in chat. And we'll be on Twitter today too. Our hashtag for today is hashtag #TheGlamers, all one word. So let's go to Jenny. Jenny, hello. Let me introduce you. Jenny Ryan is head of learning and culture at MOLI, the Museum of Literature Ireland. The Museum of Literature Ireland branded MOLI in an homage to Molly Bloom, a literary museum in Dublin, Ireland. It opened in September 2019. The museum is a partnership between the National Library of Ireland and the University College Dublin, UCD. It holds a permanent collection of James Joyce-related material, including his copy number 1 of Ulysses, and revolving exhibitions on other Irish literary figures. With a wide range of audio and immersive displays, it has been nominated for and won a number of awards for design and architecture. Molly opened on Culture Night in September 2019 and was open to the public for 6 months before the pandemic closed her doors. Jenny's here today on behalf of Molly's digital learning team to talk with us about the Bright Spark Creative Bursts, a series of short daily creative writing videos for young people, families, and educators during the pandemic. These workshops were facilitated by the renowned Irish children's writer, Sarah Webb. Jenny told me that she and her learning team want to take visitors on a journey through their own creativity. And they use the gardens, historical houses, and exhibitions of Molly as an inspiration to enable visitors, both online and on site, to explore their creative potential in whatever form that takes. So take it away, Jenny, on behalf of Molly.
Thank you so much for that lovely, warm introduction. Let's get started. I'll jump straight into it. So, as Michael mentioned there, at the core of the museum's vision is the desire to bring visitors on an inspiring journey through Irish writing. We encourage visitors of all ages to explore their creative potential with a focus on imaginative development, aesthetic observation, curiosity, and creative play. We deliver our programme in a style and tone that attempts to demystify the writing process and really focus and promote literacy, confidence and agency, and focus on the failures and the joy and the complexity of drafting and mistakes. As James Joyce so eloquently said, mistakes are the portals of discovery, and we embrace the very essence of that statement in our learning and digital team. So in the learning programme, like so many museums, our role is to animate and activate the exhibitions within visitors. We recognise that people bring their own lived experiences, culture, and perspective to the on-site and online space. And we are shaped by these interactions and relationships. We want and hope to be useful, educational and learner-centred, and to surprise as best we can, because we all know that they are the best parts of life, the surprise elements. So what is Bright Sparks Creative Bursts? It is a strand of programming for families and young people. Pre-pandemic, we ran these workshops on site in our museum, and it was a series of art and story workshops where families and young people or guardians or aunties, uncles, grandparents could engage creatively together. The capacity was obviously limited because it was on site, so maybe 50 people, and it was Dublin centric. Later, when we look at the reach of Bright Sparks Creative Bursts online engagement, we can really see the significant opportunity digital landscape offered and the reach to audiences outside the walls of the wonderful museum. So once the lockdown happened in March 2020, we were acutely aware for the first time in a century, families were at home and actively looking for ways to be playful, be creative, but fundamentally be together. So we decided to continue our mission to spark young people's creative potential by delivering a series of online workshops that encouraged intergenerational creativity, and were delivered. There she is, the wonderful Sarah Webb, who's not only a fantastic children's writer, she's curated a temporary exhibition on children's picture book illustrator Chris Houghton, which is in our building at the moment, but she is a champion of writers, and it's great to see. Okay, so what did you need to take part in a creative burst? This slide is lovely because you can see some of the interactions online from Maya, a 10-year-old who's responding to a prompt about her spirit animal, and then a 6-year-old's response as well to their spirit animal. So essentially a key goal of ours was to ensure that the supplies needed could be found in the home, that it was as inclusive as possible, So we use subtitles, and to take part in a creative burst, all you needed was access to Wi-Fi and a device, pen and paper, and your wonderful imagination and willingness to give it a go. The writing games and prompts were aimed at kind of, in Ireland, primary school, third class plus, so maybe 8-9-year-olds, and also for older children with more challenging prompts, with parents, guardians supporting them in the creative process. So lots of our language encouraged adults to, don't worry, make mistakes, throw yourself in. So really to encourage that intergenerational play. So we went online on Monday, the 16th of March, 2020, 4 days after schools closed in Ireland. We have a digital curator in Molly, the wonderful Benedict Schlepper-Connolly. So the infrastructure was there to accelerate the online digital engagement because it was weaved into the making of Molly. Initially, like everyone, we planned to run it for 2 weeks because at the time we thought the pandemic or whatever was going on would only last for 2 weeks. But very quickly, 4 daily prompts in, we realized that we were releasing them very close together, and families needed time to get together, participate, digest, and reflect. When we ran Creative Bursts again in January 2021, based on informal feedback and reading of data, we decided to release the online Creative Bursts weekly rather than daily. We put out daily writing prompts on all of our social media, which culminated in a downloadable resource once a week. And we partnered with our national broadcaster RTE's website, which was a homeschool learning hub, and released the content weekly on their channels too. So what was the wonderful impact of Bright Sparks Creative Burst? Now look at this joy of an illustration of how young people responded to some of the prompts. On this slide are 2 pieces of work created from Creative Burst, and the engagement is via Twitter. On the left, we have a story by Juno, who's 9 years of age, about a jellyfish called Phil. And to the right, we have a work in progress comic strip by a 9-year-old, where the adult mentions that creative bursts are, and I quote, keeping the girls sane and occupied during quarantine. So, ultimately, what happened was we planned to follow our pre-pandemic strand and do intergenerational engagement online. But ultimately what happened is educators really started to embrace it because no formal homework or education had happened at this point. So we were sent on lots of homeschooling exercises via schools. And we were really enlivened to be part of the wider informal educational online arts community that supported parents and teachers during this time and allowed young people and families the space to articulate the profound change and precarious emotions at a time in history in a creative and reflective way. Well
said, Jenny. Go ahead and wrap it up, Jen. Go ahead and wrap it up. It's great stuff. Yeah.
Thanks so much. The long tail legacy of Bright Sparks Creative Burst continues. So our videos have been watched well over 6,000 times on our own sites, and that does not include the other platforms, and are still used today by schools. This is some feedback we were sent via teacher via email, who talked about in these curious times, it is wonderful to have these kind of free supports. And then Ireland and beyond, sure, if we were
Jenny, stop. You're great. You're fantastic. And will you make these slides available to the world?
We absolutely will. And you can
Perfect.
more at molly.ie.
Perfect. Thank you. And so check out Molly's slides are rich and wonderful. Jenny's slides are rich and wonderful. Molly is rich and wonderful. So please check it out. Please, Jenny, put those links in the chat. And let's, Katerina's back and she's okay. Just a normal household, busy Corona time. But I think what we'll do now is we're going to go through Tom and Peter and then let Katerina wrap at the end. So Tom, you're up. Tom is head of publications and presentations at the Anne Frank House in Amsterdam, the museum and original hiding place of the Frank family during World War II. It is the place where Anne Frank wrote her diary. Tom and his team are responsible for creating on-site and online concepts, telling the story of Anne Frank within the historical context of the Holocaust. Today, he's here to tell you about the Anne Frank Video Diary, a prize-winning project, 2 Lovey Awards, and the Heritage in Motion Award, aiming at engaging young people with Anne Frank's history of discrimination, exclusion, and persecution. Tom, over to you.
Thank you so much. Yes, I think it's about the Video Diary, which is a video series. So why not start with the trailer of this series? Here we go. This will be my first 30 seconds. So only 4,5 minutes left.
Ik ben Anne Frank. Ik wil iets doen waardoor mensen me kunnen herinneren. Ik ben nu bezig met mijn videodagboek. Ik vind het gewoon erg dat mensen al zo'n oordeel over me hebben. Dat ze me zo slecht vinden. Ik ben geboren.
Oh. Here we go. The concept of this video diary is quite simple. It's actually, what if Anne Frank had got a video camera as a birthday present instead of a diary? It is, I think we can all agree on that, a very, very simple idea, but nevertheless, it cost a lot of, well, let's say we had a lot of thoughts about how doing it, and many, many lengthy discussions on which I'll come back later. We started out with one series, which is a YouTube series that aired in 2020 last year, and it was based on Anne Frank's diary entries. And because many of our viewers, which are mainly girls, I should say, between, let's say, 10 and 16, but also, of course, a lot of boys and older people as well, but ask, okay, this is beautiful, but will you do a series about what happened after the arrests? So this year we were able to do a sequel, we call it, that's kind of season 2, and that was in cooperation with a public broadcaster. And in that series, we picture what happened after the arrest of the people in hiding. So that was the Frank family and, of course, the other people in hiding as well. When we started thinking about this concept, we were aware that a lot of criticism was likely to come our way, because although we really stayed true to Anne's diary and the historical facts, we knew that we could expect criticism because we were adapting an original and authentic and of course worldwide well-known story, a book to new media. Then the question is, why did we do it? Well, I think main reason is because youth is a very important target group for the Anne Frank House. We believe it's important to keep the story of Anne and the history of the Holocaust alive. And we always are working on and thinking about new ways to present this history. It can be in VR, for example. We have a virtual reality, Secretanics, so that is the hiding place in virtual reality for Oculus, and also on our website in a 360 environment. We are working on an augmented reality app of Anne's room, where she wrote a diary, and rooms of kids nowadays telling their stories. And these are always stories which are related, of course, to Anne's history, the history of, let's say, discrimination and, in the end, persecution. And that is why we thought of this new, let's say, vlog-style series to present Anne's history. What we did was, as I said, 2 seasons, as we call it. Season 1 is 15 episodes of very short clips of about 6 minutes. Which were released in 2020, March the 30th was the first episode aired. And we have 6 educational extra videos, which are about topics about the war, the occupation, but also, of course, anti-Semitism, etc. And then there's a second season with 3 episodes, which is about the period after the arrest. To market the series, we mainly used our own social media channels, like our Instagram account, Facebook, and of course our YouTube channel as well. You saw the trailer, but we had other short clips as well. There was a small budget for advertising, so we had some paid advertisements, but most was like organic, because the the moment we announced this video series, it really helped us. Shall I say, the channel grew because it kind of really resonated with the young people, and the number of followers on Insta and the number of subscriptions on YouTube really really went up. And of course, we had a lot of free press, because when you do anything with Anne Frank, there's always international press interested, national press, of course, as well, but also international press. So we have papers, newspapers, international TV, online news, etc. I think I've 5 minutes are over. Okay, just the numbers. We're very happy with the numbers. Just watch them when you come back. But what is most interesting, I think, is the engagement. It's in not only quantitative but qualitative as well, which was in the YouTube comment sections, where there were people telling us that they really liked the series. Well, of course, we're happy with that. But also there was, it sparked a lot of discussion about discrimination and anti-Semitism nowadays. And that is, of course, much more interesting. And what really struck us, what we aired during the first lockdown of during the pandemic, and people started discussing about whether the situation Anne Frank was in was the same as their own situation. And of course, others said, no, of course, you cannot say that. And it really sparked a discussion. And that was quite interesting, because this is really what we're aiming for. We want people to think about that situation relating to their own situation. And we do not really, you know, you can say it's bad to do it like that, or it's good. We don't really have an opinion about that. Of course we do, but we don't really share that. It's most important to make them aware of their own situation and let them compare it to the historical situation. And we get this lengthy discussions in the YouTube panels.
That's great. And I'm sure, Tom, I think that probably the attendees will have a lot of questions about using YouTube as a comments as a place for conversation, particularly with such a fraught and intense subject matter. So maybe in the Q&A. And then will you, are you able to share these slides?
Yes, I will.
Please do. They're really, really terrific. Yours and Jenny's both. Thank you so much. I really am very energized by what you've done. So now, and to switch gears very quickly to Peter Arts. Peter Arts is head of audience participation and communication at SMAC, the Municipal Museum of Contemporary Art in Ghent, Belgium. Peter's responsibilities are somewhat unusual in the museum field. He's responsible for audience engagement, education, and communication at the museum, and he also teaches communication design in Antwerp. So, Peter, the floor is yours.
Yes, okay. So this is the main question that we always have in mind when we start working. So how connecting with different audiences, and children are one of our main concerns, because we are thinking of future audiences when we think of children. During the pandemic, we noticed that it wasn't that easy to, that it wasn't that easy to connect with the people from Ghent. Everybody was in his homes. And it's important to understand that the city of Ghent is a very cozy medieval place where there's a lot of opportunity to go walking around. And that is essential to the idea that I'm going to show you, because the government and also local communities inspired people to go walking outside as a way to get fresh air, leave the screen. And that was for us an opportunity to actually start thinking of strategies of connecting with people, not through the screen, but in live. We always have a strategy in mind when we think of something, which is lowering the threshold for contemporary art, not just by trying to attract people, but by reaching out. If you can't come to us, we come to you, which is in our genes as a museum of contemporary art, and certainly when it was the COVID period and the lockdown period. And by involving children, we can make also their parents aware of the wealth of our SMAC collection. Why do I mention this? Because we have an urgent plan to go for a new museum and convince local politicians that it is necessary to have a new building to be possible to receive more people. The inside of what I'm talking about now, which is a very specific small part of the imaginary museum, is that when children are spending so much time behind their televisions, behind their screens, that everybody forgot that we need to do things to draw them perhaps outside. And that is what we did with this idea. Try to activate them, inspire them to go outside. We have a strong focus for this one on the physical experience. And that is an automatic reflex that we have. If everybody zigs, we want to zag. If everybody goes more on digital, we say, like, ho, 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 why are we going on digital? Perhaps it's more interesting to use digital and to move people physically. In this, you can show more of a human face in your actions and become more of a companion, a compagnon de route, as we say in French, and then see what happens. Well, the Imaginary Museum is a concept that started in a theme year where we wanted to put visually impaired people more into focus. And we created during summer a space where visually impaired and normal children could discover the collection through their ears. So we made plays, immersive audio plays, that actually took them along to the works of art that weren't visible. And when I refer to strategy, that is an underlying thread that we always have in mind. We have a lot of works in our collection, about 2,600, that can't be on show because of the bad building, hence the new museum. So how can we make this come alive, this collection, in many different ways? And one of these ways is through your ears. So it started as a blind and impaired idea that inspired us to build this audio collection. So the idea is to keep on making stories about each collection work and to go for a gallery of audio works. Yeah? What we did then during the pandemic is use this source of existing stories and to take children outside. And we took that into, we communicated online to announce that we were having an interesting visual tour. That, on the other hand, the visual tour, I'll tell you about in a minute, is about a bear hunt, and that's something this connects with. Is that the pandemic had its ups and its downs. As soon as we were able to physically get in touch with people, go outside, we distributed these flyers in neighborhoods where there were a lot of children and invite them to discover the park. So the museum is located in a park environment, and inviting them, because at that moment the museum was still closed, to go and visit the park with a route plan. And we had the QR codes with the audio works hidden as a treasure hunt in the park. That was the main idea. So what we did is build on something existing, use existing technology, use the insight that it would be something interesting to pull people outside and go from there. Next thing is that...
Peter, last slide here.
Yes, last slide, then I prefer this one.
Perfect.
During the pandemic, we also launched the challenge to draw collection works in the street with chalk. And this has grown into a big contest between schools to draw the biggest SMAC collection work. And then we go with a drone to film the school and make a portrait of the work. And that is still going on now. So that is a next of these things. This is the bear hunt I was talking about, that pulled people outside. Posters that came about, you'll read all that about the distribution of the posters. This is all during lockdown, and then some learnings at the end, so that it doesn't, it's just like shooting in the wild. No, it's built on something.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Peter. That's terrific. Katerina, let's hand it over to you to sort of remix your introductory talk into a concluding talk. And as everyone saw in the chat, we're running a little long, so you be selective in your choice of slides and comments, Katerina. The floor is yours.
We are a group of partners that I would like to thank, as well as the speakers and Europeana for hosting this event. The GLAMers project so comes as an umbrella initiative around all these the talks that you have heard from the three distinguished speakers. This project as a whole is about practical examples of how GLAMs can be more resilient and agile through digital youth engagement in their activities. Why does this matter? First, because there are few studies that explain how youth audience can be best reached in GLAM activities, especially youth as a target group. And the other fact is that youth activism happens in many forms, and now it's the time perhaps to connect better the way that digital youth activism happens, especially during the pandemic, through hackathons, crowdfunding, maker spaces, and open innovation in general, into a social movement that can also reach and be and can be of benefit in the cultural heritage sector. That was the point behind the motivation behind the GLAMers project, is about digital, but also co-creation, participation, engagement in the most active sense. We have benefited a lot, and I would like to thank all these institutions that offered us the grounding of this study we did, NEMO, ICOM, and Europeana, who produced publications about the impact of the pandemic on the GLAM sector. So what we wanted to do is to collect exemplary youth engagement practices in European GLAMs, to share these examples and in the perspective of building resilience and agility, and through this process to better understand the challenges and the opportunities when we engage young persons in the outreach activities. Very few things about the methodology. We started with a very wide collection of practices, 92 practices, and then we screened them through main selection criteria, because we wanted to select practices that first was a response to the pandemic, second, they engaged youth audiences, third, they used hands-on easy technologies, fourth, that they inscribed the collection in a contemporary context, and five, they promoted self-expression of young people in these initiatives. So these are the 15 original practices that we identified. 3 of which you had the pleasure to have a first-hand experience from their initiators today. Each of these practices have been, let's say, analyzed through this 5-item typology, which is common to the 15. That was the point of having a kind of homogeneous look to the 15 different and diverse, I would say, practices. And this is how it looks, its practice looks in our publication. Michael, I don't think I will have the time to discuss these 4 practices, which is again part of the set of the 15. This is a TikTok initiative by the French Dancing Theatre, and this is from the Liverpool Museum. But stay tuned, on November 11, we have the Liverpool Museum director who will explain about this practice. And also our publication has this advice of the GLAMs to other GLAM institutions and cultural heritage institutions as a whole, beyond the practice that they organize, that they run, pieces of advice on what is transferable and what can be achieved in other contexts. So this is the publication that we released with the tremendous support of the hardworking team of the GLAMers partners that I would like to thank also through this opportunity, and the infographics that accompany this open access publication. Mike, that was all. Would you like you to wrap up with our two next events?
That was amazing. Yeah, you're going to share your slide. So we have two follow-up events, or two parts of Katerina and her colleagues' campaign on this initiative. We'll be doing a afternoon training session to go in deep with designing for young people using the learnings of the GLAMers project. That'll be on October 13th. It'll be very interactive and very participatory. We will be rolling up our sleeves to each invent our own project using the design factors that Tom and Jenny and Peter and the other studied experts have surfaced. And then on November, what's the date? 11th, there's going to be another webinar similar to this one. So tell your friends and share it with your mama and your daddy. Okay, I think unless there are other comments from speakers, let's go to Q&A. And I see for participants in today's webinar, there's a Q&A button at the bottom. You can click that and tell us what's on your mind. So this first one is a question for Peter from Sarah. Question for you, Peter. Would it be possible to know what platform you use to host your audios? If possible, I would also like to know how you promoted your program. Amazing project. Thanks for sharing it today.
No, thank you. No, well, that's something I mentioned in the last bit. Always use existing proven technology, certainly if time is short and budget is limited. And that is something we always take into account. It's also a reflex as a starting point. What does exist already? Like, for example, the audio plays, for each, we do sessions, first writing sessions to write the plays. That is the hard bit. And then the recording, you just need good voices and someone who knows to direct voices. And in total, we paid about 2,500 euros each time for 3 to 4 plays. That's the basis. The technology is just we put them on the website. So it's embedded audio code on our website, audio content, MP3, and you can easily exit from any device. And then just generate QR codes and you're off. As simple as that.
That's really great. And I'll say that one of the findings of Katerina's across these 90 projects was absolutely one of the 4 most important themes we saw was to use existing technology. And it seems that time is always short and budget is limited within the GLAM sector. So thanks for spotlighting that, Peter. I see a question Tom already answered privately, but from Lawrence Swader, who was, I don't think he'd mind me saying was the first chief technology officer, I think was his title, at the US Holocaust Memorial Museum in Washington, DC, and a friend for a long time. Larry asked how much moderation has been required on video comments. Do you want to talk about that a little, Tom?
Yeah, of course. When we started not when we started the project, but when we started airing the episodes, we were kind of scared about the comments we will get. And there was a team of moderators ready to clean the comments if necessary, because we were a bit afraid. Our other YouTube videos, they don't have a comment section, but we really wanted a comment section here because we wanted to engage with with the viewers, of which we knew they would be young. They would be between 10 and 16, something like that we expected. But what we saw was very positive. Most comments were kind of very, very positive, but also kind of very simple one-way comments like I like it, or I love it, or this is beautiful. Others were questions like, is this the real Anne Frank? Which kind of surprised me, to be honest, but it really was a question. And there were many more questions about the story, but also about the series. Will you do a sequel about after the arrest, etc., which was one of the drivers to make a second series, actually. But we had very, very limited very limited comments that we had to remove or correct. And in most instances, other viewers corrected the people who said something like, well, it's all fake, or the diary is fake. We never had real, let's say, anti-Semitic comments or something like that, or really racist or discrimination, how do you say, comments like that. So we were very positive. We really expected the worst, but it turned out to be very good, and some very interesting discussions as well, which is good, of course, which is what we wanted to discuss, either the historical part or the COVID-related thing, etc. So no, we were very positively surprised, I should say.
It gives me chills a little bit to hear it. That's sort of the dream. It's supposed to work like that. And I think with all of the punishing news we've had about the toxicity of social media platforms in the last 2 or 3 years, it's heartening to me to hear a positive story like that, although I don't doubt that there are thousands of others we just don't hear about.
Of course, yeah.
Jenny, I'd like to pitch a question to you, and that is your beautiful young institution had to close after 6 months because of the pandemic. And I'm wondering if what effect closing had on your thinking about audience and purpose and mission at such a tender age.
Yeah, I think really we had spent so much time working towards opening, and we're just we had done all our partner development in our education end with schools around what they wanted, and things were running brilliantly, and then we closed. Our intent and our mission has always remained the same, as well as our values like courage to experiment, equality, pride, creativity. So we really had to hook back into what is our mission and what is our values. And just like where we are in life, where we are now is not where we're always going to be, but we felt we were in a very distinct position. We didn't have all the kind of repository and collections that perhaps other museums would have, archival footage. We had very limited amount. We did have Radio Molly, which is our 24-hour digital radio station, which was brilliant. So we had that kind of framework set up. And really, myself and the team's approach is always looking at ways of saying, right, this is a disruptor and it is a challenge, but out of every challenge and chaos comes creativity and opportunity to innovate. And essentially, that's what we did. We're like,
hold that thought. That's the perfect place. That's the perfect note to have a sort of a pause on right now. I have a follow-up question for you, but as promised, it's about 1/4 and the formal, not that this event has been super formal to begin with, but the formal program of this event is over, and you guys have social permission, with our great thanks, to go on with your afternoon now, but we'll stay for another 10, 12 minutes and continue this conversation. We'd love it if you would all join us. Thanks for coming. And if you want to stay in touch with Katarina's project, this initiative, and our wonderful speakers, the GLAMers.eu is the place to go. Is that right, Katarina? And she'll drop a couple links in the chat. So Jenny, a quick follow-up question for you. Radio Molly. I was also thinking about Peter's comment that when we see something that's out of vogue, we think, that looks like something we want to do. And if we see something that's super vogue, we think, we don't want to do that. So radio station is kind of a retro thing to do. Tell us a little bit about the programming and concept of Radio Molly.
Yeah, I think when we opened up, or we were planning to open up, we were aware that digital world and landscape, so much of storytelling and literature exists within that space. But there is also that kind of niche audience of radio and oral storytelling too, right? So essentially, as a museum, although it is kind of claimed and staked in the past, you know, a point where everyone stood around together and listened at the same time to the same radio story or transmission. It also is very much, in many ways, when we listen to podcasts, there is a real appetite for hearing very specific stories at specific lengths on very specific themes. So it was also kind of very linked up into where we are now. So lots of the platform was there kind of as a digital repository in many ways. We have lots of academic readings, recordings. We're also aware that we're not just a repository, we are a little incubus. We are a space for the future storytellers as well. So how do we use that space in clever ways? Little did we know, you know, my job initially when I came along was like, learning education, brilliant, work with the community to animate spaces and places. And then myself and Ben, once the lockdown happened, we were just like, let's join together in a perfect learning digital marriage and see what we can do and just say yes and really try and find a warm, creative space online where we could be useful.
Perfect. The and I'll direct you, Tom. I don't want to make you multitask because I'm about to ask you a question, but Lawrence Swader had a follow-up comment question for you in chat about media literacy. But before you direct your attention to that, really, for any of you, on my mind throughout this project is that certainly most of the creative teams I've worked for they're not trained in early childhood and young people development, cognitive, social, emotional development. Some of the project I've worked on, people consider young people to be just little shrunken magical adults with special powers. And a lot of rhetoric is out there. Oh, if only we could, you know, empower the young people. I'm interested if in any of your teams, if you've worked with experts in childhood education, early development, how you, or in contact with the young people themselves, how you kind of manage the complexity of developing content for people who are undergoing such massive change from week to week and year to year. Any of you who would like to have some thoughts on that, I'd be very eager to hear that.
I can say something about it. I think we have some knowledge about that, some in-house knowledge about that, because we, of course, make a lot of educational materials for, let's say, 10 to 15-year-olds as well. But these are more like, well, as I say, educational on a cognitive level and not so much creative. So we were a bit insecure. And what we did was, well, it was quite simple, but it helped a lot. Just that focus groups participated when we worked on the concept. So we had 10 to what was it? I think 10 to 12-year-old groups from the Netherlands, Germany, and Brazil. And we had 13 to 18-year-olds from the Netherlands as well, and from Argentina, and from, I guess it was Portugal. And we discussed the concept with them, and we showed them pictures and storyboard and kind of well, discussions about what it should taste like as well. Not only like which shall we. First we thought, or we didn't really think it, but we said to them, we want to do this with the entire diary, which is about 300 pages, which is about 100. That would be about 100 episodes. Every diary entry would be an episode in that variety. And they unanimously said, "Oh, please don't." And then, okay, but how many and how long should it be, and what kind of topics should we use? And that was quite interesting because we saw a big difference between the Dutch and especially the Dutch and the Brazilian. Because in the Netherlands, and Frank is taught in primary school to let's say 10 to 12-year-olds. And in Brazil, it's much more like, she's much more like a literary person. Also historical, but also literary. And that means that let's say the 15, 16-year-olds in Brazil were really into that aspect of our life as well. And Frank as a writer, not as much as in the Netherlands, she's more like the Holocaust victim. So what we try to do is find a way to kind of merge all these reactions we got from the different age groups and the different nationalities as well, of course, and kind to, well, create something that could engage all of them, or all of them could relate to. And what we see now, and that is, there are many reasons why in different countries, the different number of viewers. But what we see is that most viewers come from the Netherlands, which is maybe logical because it's a Dutch series, it's Dutch spoken. We have subtitles in many languages, but many countries or many viewers are not really used to subtitles, I guess. But our second best, let's say, second best country is Brazil, where we have Portuguese subtitles. Although Anne Frank is much more popular in, for example, Argentina. Popular is a kind of weird word, of course, but like Argentina or Germany, we saw in Brazil that it really took off, and literally hundreds of thousands of viewers came from Brazil, which was very interesting to see.
I'm so glad you mentioned that, Tom. And I wonder, Peter, sort of two questions for you. One is this aspect of globality. I mean, all of your organizations are rooted in a specific place, a specific culture, a specific time, and yet one of the great majesties of the internet and the web is that it allows interested people from anywhere in the world to participate. We kind of take it for granted, but it's a frickin' miracle. Peter, I'm wondering how you all think at SMAC about this kind of global, local playfulness or interchange. Your program with bears is a super local thing, but it completely delights me, and I'm 6,000 kilometers away from you.
Yeah, well, the difficulty everybody is confronted with is the aspect of reach. Like the example from Molly, for example, is fantastic that you can build an audience probably with also limited means. In our case, in Belgium, it is so hard to finally reach a big enough audience. So the effort might be on the internet, but the effect is always locally. As soon as you go outside your own radius, then it's going to cost much more money. And again, it's even if it's social media, you might have something that touches people, but it's rarely that it has that big an interest that it will spread organically. So you have to put money behind it, and then it becomes again a money issue. And do you need something that people can't really participate in internationally? Do you need to communicate that? If you have to make choices, you say no. So that's where the limits are. Strategy-wise, for us, the international communities are more the art scenes, because that has to do with what you have to offer curator-wise, exhibition-wise, and locally, it's that social connection that counts. But this makes it also very challenging to get everything through the same funnel. And there you also have to make choices, manage it. It's a challenge, but it's also something that plays a role in our thinking. Definitely.
When you say to get things through the same funnel, do you mean the funnel of approval and resource allocation within the museum?
No, it's the funnel of what an audience physically can grasp. It's yeah. There's so many. If you would see our agenda of topics or initiatives, that you take just to create a dynamic in the museum, which you need to have subjects to talk about, well, there's only X amount of things that you can see. And that's something we often forget. If you look, for example, Instagram, what do you get to see? Just organically, it's the things that you often like the most yourself, and that is limited. And what comes in between, that are paid views. See, so
well said, Peter. And if I could carry on for hours with you three, you four, and I hope I get to do that sometime soon. But I think that note about attention is super important, and a really good note to lack on is that I think ultimately what the GLAMers is asking as a project and an idea is for people who make decisions in our institutions to allocate some more of their precious attention to young people and their needs and their families and their adults in many different ways. And I think it's right at the top of the hour. And if I may ask, we still have 33 participants on the webinar, which is fantastic. Let me ask, as people leave for the day, maybe type 3 or 4 words into the chat as you check out of things that are on your mind. Just 3 nouns or verbs or adjectives, things that you're thinking about right now as you leave. And let me, on behalf of everyone here, thank Katerina and Tom and Jenny and Peter for a really great hour here. I've really learned a lot and enjoyed it. And I look forward to seeing your slides. Check the GLAMers website, check Twitter, hashtag the GLAMers. We'll be posting stuff there. And thank you all for coming. We hope to see you again October 13th or in November. So thanks.